Bienvenidos, Ushamdi, and welcome Anne Arundel Community College learners from the spring 2023 semester taking the CTS-233 Section 400 Network Programmability course. This is the Cisco Networking Academy's DEVASC 200-901 Certification Exam Preparation course, and in this supplemental video tutorial that builds off of what we looked at in Lab 747, talking about Ansible, we are going to cover a ton of very interesting ground here. You're going to walk away with a lot of usable code in Ansible, and we're actually going to circle back to that Python script that we looked at when we backed up the Cisco switch here on my local network. So what are you going to learn about in this video? Well, we're going to take a look at the Python script again, where we've got multiple devices being backed up at the same time, leveraging the data structures in Python I talked about, which was the Python list. And then inside that list, we've got dictionaries, and each dictionary just simply represents a different Cisco device. So you're going to have that code that you'll walk away with that you can easily extend and modify for your network. And then we're going to dig right back into Ansible. We're going to cover what I commented on in the previous 747 video, is how to add timestamps so that every time we run that Ansible playbook, we end up with a unique date timestamp on every backup file, so that if we ran it more than once in a day or more than once in a sitting, we would know the differences between the files based on the timestamp information. But that's not all you're going to learn here. So we're going to see how to back up a physical router, or I should say a physical Cisco switch, using that Ansible playbook. And then we're going to go deep dive into the difference between the connection local and the network CLI. And I'm going to show you differences, and we're going to talk about the use cases as to why you would use connection local as opposed to saying network CLI and then providing some additional information. So we're going to see really good examples on that, and I'm going to give you more context around connection local, because we kind of glossed over that, and I just commented that, yeah, it's not calling SSH directly, or it's not using SSH directly. So I want to specify, get specific there, and go into the semantics. And then we're going to see how we can group a series of hosts in and use an Ansible playbook, right? Because if we can do it in Python, how would we do it in Ansible? And I think you'll see that, it's just as easy to do it, if not easier to do it in Ansible than it is in Python. But let's dive in right now. And this code is all staged, ready to go. So the first thing that we want to look at is this Python multi-Cisco device backup script right here. So let's see what we changed in this Python script in order to get it to back up multiple devices. You'll remember in the 747 video, what did I say? Well, we've already seen Python code that uses a list, and inside of that list, you just have these little dictionaries. And each little dictionary with its key value pairs defines a device. And so that's what we're doing right here. So take a look at the dictionary. That's our first element in the devices list. And how could you extend or modify this? Well, let's say we add another router to our network. Well, then I would just take that dictionary, copy and paste it right below that dictionary after we put a comma in there, just like we did here, and then put the device IP in, put the username and the password in that we're going to use to connect to that device. It's that simple. Now, the easy thing here is that this username Cisco and that password on these devices, that username has privilege level 15. So we'll deal with that in the Ansible script. But I wanted to show you that what I had commented on earlier, we could easily use a Python list, and in that list, we just simply add in a little dictionary with the devices that we want to back up. So we take a look at the rest of this. How do we iterate over that? And you can see that's checking to see, is the backup directory there? If it's not, then we're going to create it. So we run a for loop. So we just take all that other code we saw in the original Python script and we squeeze it into this for loop to iterate over the Python list, going dictionary by dictionary and backing those devices up. So let's go ahead and run this script right now. We'll just come right back here and we'll say Python 3, and we run our multi-backup. Now remember, not only is this going to give us information as to what it's doing, but it's going to print out all of the configuration backup date and timestamp information as well. So you can see here we've got the year, we've got the month, we've got the day, and then you've got the time in that format right there. And so you can see the configuration backups were saved. So if I was to say ls-l on ECC-backups, here are all of the backups that are being run. And as we can see here, here's that set from, so from today, from 05, right? And you can see this is the one that we just ran, I believe, the 1324, if I'm looking above. Yeah, 1324.30 and 1324.18. So 12 seconds in between. So again, if I was to VI that script, instead of saying more, if we VI'd this Python script, you can see I'm backing up 2 devices on my local network here, but what about that virtual machine? Well, let's go ahead and do that. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to say 6YY. And again, you could do this in VS Code, but I'm doing it in VI or Vim. And let's go ahead and just change this to 121. Right, because that's the IP address of the DEVASC virtual machine. So let's now go ahead, let's save this. So again, this is how you could extend this script, right? So as you're adding Cisco devices to your network, boom, all you do is copy those 6 lines, paste it, change the IP address for whatever the device is. And again, we're assuming same username, same password, and that they've got privilege exec, and we run it again. And so let's go ahead and run it again, and we're going to get that same output, all of that nice verbose output. So super Python script right here that's going to go back up all your devices. Again, assumptions are that this user Cisco has privilege exec, but what a great way to automate the backup of all of your configurations on your Cisco devices. So there we go. We've got device 192.168.1.1. We got 192.168.1.2. And now we should get 192.168.121. And there it is. That simple, right? The CSR 1KV. Okay, so that's the Python script. Now we talked about the Ansible scripts yesterday, or I'm sorry, the Ansible playbooks yesterday, and how I got to the end of one of the playbooks and I said, you know what, it would be great if we would add in the date timestamp information. So we've done that. And let's take a look at more backup _ Cisco router playbook.yaml. Okay, so here it is right here. Remember, we had this destination, right? This is where we were backing up the, or putting the configs in the backups directory, and they were going to be named show _ run _ the host name. And this is where I said, well, you know what? Every time we run that, it's just going to overwrite what's in there. What if I want to keep sort of a catalog of the configurations and the changes they've been experiencing, and I'm going to keep those in unique individual files? Well, in order for us to do that, a date timestamp is perfect. So here is how we would do that. And you can see here you've got the inventory host name, and instead of just the .txt, we want to squeeze in an underscore and then this code right here, right? So what is lookup? So lookup is used in order to provide static data to Ansible in terms of the playbook, and then the pipe command actually runs a shell command on the host that Ansible's on the control host that Ansible's running on. And so what am I doing here? I'm saying, okay, this lookup function right here, this is an Ansible convention, and then the pipe, which is also an Ansible convention, is basically going to say the value that this lookup function returns, which is run this shell command, right? This bash shell command here. Because we're using the bash shell. And so let me show you how you could break this down. So what if I say date, right? Well, that's part of this command right here is date. Well, what if I say date, and I'm curious, well, what is this plus capital Y? Plus, went backwards there. We're going to say plus %, capital Y. Well, what do you think that stands for? Yeah, that stands for the year. Well, what if I build off of that and I say dash %, M? What do we get then? Well, I get the year and then the month, and then we get the day. And then we have an underscore, and I want the hour, right? And so this is how you would build that out. If you wanted to see all of the possible options you could use here, you could say man date, right? And see, and there you go. So there are all of the different sequences that you can use with the date command. You could put the century in there, right? I mean, you go crazy with stuff here. But the bottom line is we just saw how we can then go ahead and kind of test and build out our script that ultimately the Ansible lookup function using the pipe command, right, which is going to run a shell command, this bash shell command, that's date. And that is the value that gets appended right after the inventory host name before we have the .txt. So if that's true, excuse me, if that's true, let's go ahead and run this playbook here. And I'm trying to avoid typing a whole bunch of stuff in. And so we'll say Ansible dash, oops, come back here, Ansible dash playbook. And so we'll run that Ansible playbook. So there's the play, right? What's the name of the play? Automatic backup. What are the tasks? Task 1, displaying the running config. Task 2, saving the output. So it saved it into /backup. So if I say ls-l to backups and we hit enter, you can see that now we are getting date timestamp information on, and I think, what did I back up there? The CSR1KV. So it would have been this guy right there, right? So you can see now we have the show underscore run underscore host name CSR1KV underscore year, month, day, underscore, hour, minute, second, so that if I continually run the, if I continually run this playbook, right, multiple times in the same day for whatever reason, maybe part of my change control is, hey, can you create a backup of the running config before you go in there and start making changes to the running config so that we could, restore from that, or at least see what, do a diff and see, hey, what changed? So we just keep running this, right? And it's going to run super quick and very convenient. ls, and I guess we could just go back here, ls-l on backups and take a look at that. And there you go. And you can see it's down to the second, right? And that is going to guarantee, again, within reason, that every time I run this myself right here, that we're going to be in great shape. Or if a cron job were to run this Ansible playbook, we're generating and keeping automated backups of the running configuration off of these Cisco devices. Now, granted, we take a look at this playbook here, and if we were to go, if we were to go back here to the playbook, and I thought I had that, all the date commands. So if we take a look at this, you'll remember we're using a single host in the hosts file, right? Remember, if I say more hosts, what were we working with here? Well, I had dumped in here ECC. I put multiple hosts in the host file, but that playbook only calls one host. How could I call a group of hosts? And so let's take a look at that example. Let's go ahead and type clear. We'll type ls. So right here is my group playback, or a group backup of Cisco devices, right? So again, in the previous Ansible playbook, it said for the device, we just had the name in there, CSR1KV. So let's go ahead and take a look, and actually I don't even need to do that. We'll just say group underscore backup. There we go. So for the host, in the previous playbook, I had CSR1KV. That's going to back up a single host. But here, I have this network-devices. Well, what does that mean? Well, let's take a look at this special hosts file that I created called group of hosts. And actually, let me clear the screen here and let's rerun that so we can see it up here at the top. So here is how you could have a hosts file that indicates that I want to back up multiple hosts. I'm going to put them into a group. And so here's how you signify that this is going to be a group. And the group name is network-devices. I could have put in here Trav's network-devices or whatever. But again, network devices. And so what are the network devices? Well, it's the CSR1KV. It's my local switch on my local net, or I'm sorry, the physical switch on my local network, switch 1, and then I have this other switch, switch 2. And so here's the information that we can use to get logged into those devices, but we can reference all three of these devices in the host file by specifying a group name here. And then in that playbook, under hosts, instead of saying, host and then put CSR1KV and then do another host thing for whatever, you don't do that, right? You create the group in your Ansible, in the inventory file, and then you specify it and indicate that here. So let's run this and see what happens when I say Ansible-playbook, and this is going to be, and I can't remember the name, it's group of something. Yeah, group underscore backup. So group underscore backup. Let's run this playbook. Excuse me. Oh, I'm sorry. And fortuitous failure. So what just happened right there? Well, take a look. Couldn't match supplied pattern, ignoring network devices. So I run the playbook. I just told you that, yeah, that new host file, that specialized hosts file in which I've got that group defined network devices, and we looked at that. But remember, when you run Ansible like this, Ansible playbook, and I try to run the playbook, where is it going to look for the hosts file? Well, it's looking for that Ansible inventory file with the name HOSTS, hosts. So when I do this, it looks into that hosts file and says, dude, I don't know what you're talking about. There is no network-devices group defined in here. And there's not. Remember, for testing and for what we're doing right here, we need to say -I for the inventory file, right? And again, it's not hosts, it's group of hosts. I think this is correct here. It's group of hosts. And invalid characters are found in the group name, and that's okay. And so there we go. So take a look at that. It grabbed all of those devices, right? Displaying the running config for these 3 devices. It's saving the output to the .backups. And at the end of that playbook, excuse me, we had those unique names. So if I was to say ls-l, the unique timestamp for each of the names, ls-l on backups, we would see that it just ran through. And there you go, 1335. And so we should all have 1335 and 49 seconds, 1335, 49 seconds for that one. And there you go. So that just backed up those configs. Don't believe me? Well, let's take a look at more backups, and we'll do that one there. We'll say copy and then paste. And this is the running config for that device. So if I ever wanted to go back and check and see, you know, what's going on there, I could go back because now I've got automated backup. So now we know how to back up a single device. We know how to back up multiple devices at the same time. We know how to do that with Python and Ansible. And again, it's kind of a toss-up. What might be easier to do? Well, that's kind of up to you. If you're really, really good with Python, maybe the Python dictionary inside the list is the way to go, or you can use Ansible, or it may depend on which tools are available to you in your shop. All right, well, now we're going to close out with something we skimmed over in the previous video, and that was sort of the connection types, right? So let's take a look at our playbook here, and we're going to look at this playbook right here, I believe, ECC underscore switch 2. And yeah, so that's ultimately going to be what we get to, but let's look at the backup underscore Cisco router playbook. So let's dig in a little bit deeper as to what is happening here, right? So in the previous video, I said, yeah, you know, connection local, it's not using SSH. And really what I'm saying, and the devil is in the details, right? Semantics count. So what this means is that we are not calling SSH directly, right? So when you have connection local, and I got to make sure that I say this right. When you have connection local, Ansible is using, or Ansible's calling SSH through the network underscore CLI connection plugin. And that's what's happening. So when I say that when you see connection local, it means Ansible's not using SSH. It means it's not calling it directly, right? So connection :local, it's using SSH, right? But what it's doing is, it's probably more accurate to say that Ansible uses the network underscore CLI connection plugin to call SSH. So in other words, it's not calling SSH directly, it's calling it indirectly through the network underscore CLI connection plugin, right? So it does use SSH, it's just not using it directly. So then the next question that learners ask, and this actually got asked last semester, was, okay, well, wait a minute, what difference does it make? Why would I use connection local as opposed to, excuse me, the network CLI? where I would provide information. In connection local, this is a great use case when the user that you are using to connect to the device already has privilege level 15 or has elevated privilege level, so that it doesn't have to use the enable command to go from user exec to privilege exec. Excuse me. And how can we check that? Well, if I SSH over to the 192.168.1.121, if I SSH over to the DEVASC virtual machine, you can see Cisco 123 exclamation mark. Look at, I already have privilege exec when I log in because show run include username. The privilege level is 15 for this user. So all of the examples that we've been doing with the CSR1KV using Cisco and using, more importantly, the Ansible connection : local, this is the use case, or one of the use cases for that is I don't need to elevate the privileges of this user. It already logs in with privilege 15 in privilege exec mode. All right, so then we basically covered what happens if you don't need to elevate your privileges. So let's look at what happens when you do need to elevate your privileges. And so we're going to do that using switch number 2, right? So here I have this playbook, and we're going to call it more ECC underscore switch 2 underscore backup. So you can see we've got all of that in there, and actually there's another switch 2 that's kind of cleaner than that. Let's grab the no exec. So let's go ahead and say, here's our Ansible playbook, ECC underscore switch 2 underscore no exec, right? So we're not in privilege exec mode here. And you can see we've got the connection local, right? So what's going to happen when I try to access switch 2, which on the user that we're going to be using, which is in the ECC2, there should be an ECC-switch 2. There it is, switch 2 dash hosts. What did I miss there? Oh, switch 2. Sorry, I said S2. So switch 2. Oops. Hosts. Let's expand that out there. All right, so you can see that there's no magic going on in here other than the username is Cisco2. Now that user, how could we test that? Well, it's easy, right? Let me SSH over to 192.168.1.2 as the user Cisco2. Cisco2. Whoops. So there we go. Now, we're going to get prompted, so it's Cisco 123 exclamation mark, and look at, we get logged in user exec mode. So when I go to say show run, yeah, we can't do that. We would have to be in privilege exec mode. So I'm going to have to elevate my privileges here to privilege exec to be able to get to the running config. And that's really the use case that we're looking at here. So let me go ahead, clear the screen, and let's run this Ansible playbook where we don't have elevated privileges. We're using connection local, but I need elevated privileges, but we don't have them. What's going to happen when I do that? So let's go ahead and say Ansible-playbook, and I'm going to say ECC underscore switch 2 underscore no exec. Now, if I run it right now, we'd run into the same problem we did before, which is what's the host file it's going to use? Yeah, it's going to use the hosts file that's sitting right here in the current working directory, that one. We don't want it to use that one because in that hosts file, we are declaring the user is going to be, for switch 2, it's going to be Cisco. That user has elevated privileges. But as we just saw in the ECC-2 switch 2 host file, that user does not. Cisco 2 does not. So we'll say switch 2 host, and I got to throw a -i in here real quick. Sorry about that. For the inventory. Now let's run. Let's see what happens when I need elevated privileges that I don't have. And take a look right here. We're going to end up with this fatal error, right? And it shows you the prompt that it's at, indicating, hey, you're at the user exec prompt. That is not the privilege exec prompt. Boom, it failed. You cannot run show running config or show run from privilege exec. I'm sorry, from user exec. We need to be in privilege exec mode. So let's go ahead and let's fix that, and that is going to be fixed in this, well, VIECC underscore switch 2 underscore backup. So let's take a look at this playbook. So we have the connection local in here. We can ditch that. We can ditch connection network CLI. And we're going to have these variables. I'm sorry. I'm going to go. I'm putting network connection CLI back there. Or actually, yeah, we don't even need it because we variable that. So here's sort of a little more advanced way to handle how would we tell Ansible, yeah, the network iOS is going to be Cisco iOS. I'm going to use network CLI to connect. That's my username. That's my username's password that gets me into USER EXEC. And here is the specific Ansible become. So what does that mean? Become what? Well, I need to become an elevated user. What is the method to do that? I'm going to use the enable command. What's the enable password? Well, right now it's ABCD12345 exclamation mark, exclamation mark. So again, connection local is great when the user already will have privilege exec on the Cisco device. If that's not the case, then the use case for connection local is no longer there. Then you need to elevate your privileges. And here's one way to handle that is we just declare some variables here that this Ansible playbook is going to use. And so let's now run this Ansible playbook that we just edited. And we'll come back here and we'll say, and this, oops, sorry, escape there. We'll come back here and we'll say Ansible-playbook. And again, we got to get to the end of the command here because we want to type in -i, and this is going to be that ECC-switch2 hosts file. Because again, that's using the Cisco 2 user, not the Cisco user, but the Cisco, the Cisco 2 user. All right, so what happens here? Bingo, display the running config. We get it, perfect, changed because we've got a new copy of the config if I ran it again. Right, so let's run it a couple times here. Where is it backing everything up to? Well, we know it's putting it in this backups directory. Well, let's go ahead and say ls-l on backups, and that's going to show us that for switch 2, we should have, right, take a look at that, 14 seconds apart. Those have got to be the ones that we just ran. And that is going to do it for this deep dive Ansible supplement where, what did you learn here? Well, we've got a Python script now that you can easily extend and modify by simply adding in new direct dictionary objects into that Python list. Again, use case there is you've got privilege exec when you get logged in. We didn't cover elevating privileges out of the Python script. But again, very simple use case there. We added timestamps to our Ansible playbook so that now we can run that again and again and again and have unique names on the backups. We took a look at backing up the physical switches with Ansible that I have in my local network. We did a deep dive into connection local versus the network CLI, right? Remembering that that connection local, it's not directly calling SSH, it's leveraging the network CLI module, if you will, in order to make that happen. So again, it's not correct to say that connection local doesn't call SSH. It doesn't call it directly, right? It uses the Ansible, network CLI connection plugin to call SSH to get over to the device. And then finally, we looked at how to back up a group of hosts using an Ansible playbook. All right, well, hopefully this has given you a ton of use cases that are going to help solve some of the problems in your environments. All right, as always, thank you guys so much for watching. Leave some comments below. Let me know what you thought. And as always, I hope to see you in the next video.